Welcome, everybody. This is Sara Kolata. I'm an architect and an organizer of this RAP Symposium, a 5-day virtual event dedicated to the topic of business of architecture. The first edition of this RAP will take place 1st to the 5th of May at 7 p.m. Central European Time, and will welcome to stage C-level leaders, partners, directors, and founders of practices such as UN Studio, SOM, BIG, Soneta, Safdie Architects, Zaha Hadid Architects, Gensler, Perkins Will, Woods Baggett, Arab, to name just a few. The event is sponsored by Graphisoft, creator of Archicad, Chaos, creator of V-Ray, Tunark, Z by HP, Teradisi, and IE School of Architecture and Design. To check the full speaker lineup and purchase your tickets, go to www.thisrapsymposium.com. Today, we gathered for a 1-hour roundtable discussion dedicated to the topic of the money side of architecture research, devoted to all of you out there who work hard on supporting your design work with thorough research. Conventionally, we sell our services in forms of design and often get paid for the time that we spend working. Today, we will speak about ways in which monetizing on your research can help you raise your value to a trusted advisor and to be seen as an expert rather than commodity. To keep the conversation vibrant, but also to welcome diverse viewpoints on the topic, I invited amazing panelists, each to share with you their unique perspective. We are joined by Yehnia Madkour, Director of Innovation at Perkins Will. He serves on research and technology boards where he provides strategic direction to 7 research labs across the firm. He co-directs the Researcher in Residence program and champions the firm-wide innovation incubator in Vancouver. We're also being joined by Oscar Lowrie, Director at Ackroyd Lowrie, an award-winning architecture practice from London, building the cities of the future. His research into artificial intelligence and VR elevates the practice and offers unique buying and participatory design experience to his clients. And lastly, we are also being joined by Hamid Hassanzadeh, an Iranian architect, entrepreneur, researcher, and speaker. He is the owner of a famous parametric architecture platform, and his diverse business model is directly built on architectural research and monetization strategies. Quite ironically, Hamid is now running a virtual workshop and will be joining us in 15 minutes. So I will keep his question until the end. Unfortunately, we also had a last-minute emergency cancellation from our 4th panelist, Oscar. Oscar is a director of Oscar Ojeda Publishers, and in his professional career, he published over 300 architectural books. I am quite saddened that he cannot join, simply because the first time when I met him, he really impressed me with his point of view on publications, on books, and a unique perspective on the business side of this. And I simply try to share his point of view and the impression I had of him and his talking points later on by asking also questions related to the panelists present. So without any further ado, let's start. And I will direct my first question directly to Yehnia. So Yehnia, you manage research departments in Perkins Will, and yet your role is not only oriented around research. As a director, you get a fair share of business responsibilities too. Share with us how your department, and for that matter, Perkins Will, monetize on their research.
Of course. Thank you, Sarah, and thanks for organizing this. I guess my role in the simplest terms is to connect dots between our research and our projects. I'm a designer first and a researcher second. And I sit, as you mentioned, on the research board for Perkins Will, where we look at the work of our 7 research labs, which areas to investigate in, what kind of research questions to answer, and what areas of research are we going to invest in. And understanding all of this, the idea of why research is important is a key point here. The world is changing very fast. When you think about construction and digital fabrication, there are patterns in the world that are enabled by technology that are changing how we do things. Technology specifically is also coming into the design process. Again, parametric design, generative design, all the ways that we can actually enhance the process of design by using computers, not just to visualize, but in the process itself. Thinking globally, there's a heightened awareness of environmental issues, and there's a crisis in the world right now. How can we understand our footprint? How can we understanding the carbon footprint of our buildings? Also, issues of injustice and social responsibilities, new ways of mobility, autonomous vehicles, and how they affect life in cities. They're all sort of things that, when you think about it, it's too much to be thinking about in one project. And that's why you can't really explore them while they're designing projects, in my mind. And thus the need for a research ecosystem. So within Perkins Will, again, we're 26 offices. We decided on 7 research labs, and they're changing. So in a year, they might be 8 or 6. It really depends on like what are the emerging needs right now. So to describe that ecosystem, we're essentially looking at those labs that they're decentralized. Again, we're a firm of 26 studios all around the world. And each of those research labs has a director that either has a PhD in that particular topic or is a university professor at that topic, and working with designers from across the firm that are all interested within that specific topic. So we've got a human experience lab. We have a design process lab that's specifically looking at computation. We have an energy lab, a material performance lab, also building technology, robotics, and digital fabrication, as well as mobility and the new phases of changes of how people are moving within space. And all of these areas of investigations essentially have a few people that are specifically dedicated to researching those areas. They come up with research projects every year, and they affect work that's happening on projects. The idea of the research questions, they come both from, they're informed by our projects. So we look for questions that are being asked within projects, and these inform what kind of research questions we ask within the research board. And at the same time, the research and the creation of knowledge that happens within those labs informs the projects later on. So it's sort of like an ecosystem that's just running, back and forth between projects and research. And my role within that is to identify those areas of opportunity, look at strategic direction for the research. We have a director of research, John Haymaker, who is specifically directing the research. I am sort of like connecting that with our practice. And again, my experience as a designer for 15 years, I've led so many projects for the firm. I've got the eye on the practice while I'm looking at research and that application of it. We also have an innovation incubator program, and you did mention that in the introduction, which is a grant of money and time that for any of our people in the studios, that if they have an idea, there is a place for that to open up and have a few weeks to just investigate that idea. They come up with their own deliverable. And a lot of these research seeds essentially end up being much bigger research efforts that could end up being as one of the research lab projects or a tie with a university, and we're working on something that crosses multiple years. So with that, research adds value to us, and with that, we add value to our clients and the industry in general. By informing the projects, one way of monetizing is essentially making better architecture. We're making more informed architecture because we're more aware of the things that I just discussed. All these areas have deep research that's peer reviewed and we participate in that. We create that knowledge and use that to influence our project's design. So it creates this exploratory area that researchers can work in, and from there be able to affect the projects. On one of the research labs, energy lab, we created a software a few years ago that's internally used to do early energy analysis and concept design. So like, when you're massing a building very, very early on, what kind of energy impact it will have. And these all prove very beneficial later on when you're designing something that has the right direction rather than redesigning later on. Some of our research labs have their own income streams, where they essentially, the researchers are engaged in paid research investigation. So, a lab like Mobility Lab, we're doing work with various municipalities around the changes of mobility within that particular city or that particular airport, and understanding how to design that space with those changes of mobility in mind. And I'm talking micromobility, I'm talking different ways of transit, and I'm also talking about ride share and possibly autonomous vehicles in future. And what does that mean for curbs and flow through and things like that. So these become their own practice areas in a way. Like clients come to us because of that knowledge and that particular expertise and that particular research. These could be clients that we also do architecture for them, so it sort of like builds on a bigger value proposition, but they could also be clients that just come for us for that particular research. Another way that we're monetizing on this, where essentially this research can happen with either internal funding, and we're essentially creating value for projects, or we can start looking at grants that we apply for. You could have municipalities and institutes that are essentially funding money for us to work on a particular project and create a value through that. We just want to, $500,000 in grant funding from Clean BC, where I work here in Vancouver, and we're working on a software that essentially looks at carbon and understands the connection between the impact of embodied carbon in the materials that we use, and connects that directly to the software that we design in. So designers can, in real time, while they're designing, understand the impact of what they're doing, and that's in Rhino and Rabbit. Other research labs, and I did mention to you this, Sarah, before, are looking at testing ideas of alternative revenue streams. So I was directing for the last couple of years a research project around sensors research, understanding how we're looking at our buildings as a live entity. We're not just designing, a building and our transaction with our clients ends at a certain point when they come in to occupy it. We're actually looking to become a partner in the full process. So if we measure things like occupancy, flow of people, how people are using space, we validate our design assumptions or challenge them, and learn from that experience of how people are actually using that space. And when you combine people and occupancy with the bigger ideas of building performance, things like thermal comfort, visual comfort, acoustic comfort, indoor air quality, you have a much better understanding about the human experience within that space. Again, we're looking at real-time data and information that's coming from buildings, and how we can then tie a story about well-being, about comfort and human experience, and how can you then understand from this data that feedback loop from our ideas to our projects, and what do you learn from the projects back to the ideas, in a way that we can either change behavior within a certain space and environment or a workplace, or be able to advise on spatial change, and essentially create a dashboard for us and our clients to be able to see a layer of design insights, and again continue that engagement with clients on a more ongoing basis. And essentially we're within that research looking at ways that we can create a subscription service. So clients are coming to us and we design their building, but they're also there for the next few years, and they're paying us on an ongoing basis to be able to monitor the space, but also have those design insights of how to calibrate people that are using the space, and the space itself. These are like, three different ways of how business is affecting architecture and how architecture is affecting business. Happy to explore and elaborate more on this, but I'll leave some time for the other panelists as well.
Sure. No, so like when you speak about the sensory technology, I'm imagining that additionally to providing the service, the client pays also monthly, like a subscription.
Yeah, so this essentially is the idea. There is an initial effort to come up with the questions around what would we like to see in this building and what would we like to understand. So we designed this with our clients, and the idea is that we're going to be able to not just install these sensors within the space, but also have that understanding of a monthly subscription where we have a dashboard that's up and live. You can put these in meeting rooms, or you can have those for anyone that's using the building. And they can tell you very simple things like, for example, we all have been into meeting rooms where the carbon levels are rising and you suddenly have that mental fog. What if those meeting rooms are smart enough to respond to that automatically? So they know when the carbon is rising to a certain threshold, and they either open windows or automatically, or they will, tell the occupants, it might be time to take a break. So it's the building becoming essentially more responsive, and with that information space, you're enabling a much better user experience within the building.
Yeah, that's fascinating. What do you guys think about it? Ollie?
So my instant thought was like, if you were, I don't, maybe you're already doing this, but if you plug that information back into a kind of, if you sell your client a digital twin that has all of their maintenance strategies and their M&E actually kind of live, and you fed that data back into, you could then have a sort of, a sort of something that's in the cloud or in the metaverse that could actually be like a sort of barometer of the building performance, and you could kind of tweak things in the digital twin, and it would actually have an instantaneous effect on the performance of the whole building. It sounds very exciting.
100%. I mean, we're working with clients on and campuses on digital twins, and the idea is that you're essentially enabling to see like a replica of the building in the digital space, and with that, have a much better understanding of their use cases, how people are using space, but also how to optimize that buildings. And I think facilities managers specifically and owners are going to be really excited about the potential for this, as you say, Ollie. The idea that you're able to optimize and tune and fine-tune that connection between people using space and the space itself and the mechanical systems within.
Yeah, I think by the time goes, the digital twin of each building, or let's say each project, becomes as much as valuable than the actual project itself. So there's a great hype around that, how we can make this much more optimized, how we can make it much more cloud-based to work on each part of the project, like in a collaborative way with other engineers, other architects. A lot of groups are involved. I think that's a great thing to start.
Certainly, and I know that actually both you, Hamid, and Ollie are super interested in metaverse and topics of virtual reality. So in some way you're saying it, but I know what you mean is this whole digital world that opens this new possibilities for architects. And certainly it's a different topic, but a very vibrant right now.
Well, I think I said this to you before on a different thing, like that when people look back at people talking about the metaverse, they're going to cringe. It's it's going to like date really badly, like in the same way that people, when you say like, I was surfing the internet, and you're like, oh my God, that's so like 90s. That expression just disappears, right? Because the internet is ubiquitous, and the metaverse will become ubiquitous. It's going to be a 3D, representation of the internet. It's going to be the internet. No one's going to be like, oh, I'm going on the metaverse. It's like, no, the metaverse will be ubiquitous into our business and our daily lives, and it won't be like a distinctly separate thing from the internet. That's why I was doing those things.
Yeah, no, for sure. I absolutely agree with you. And actually, on that note, Ollie, I'm going to ask you about yourself and your practice, because obviously, as we can see, you're very fascinated by the topics of virtual reality. And I know that you use a lot of those methods to integrate into your practice, into the way that you deliver your projects to clients, and specifically when it comes to actually kind of chaperoning the sale, if I use that word, and also turning profitability and helping your clients be a part of the design process. So even though that is certainly using VR technology, there's a lot of research that goes into it. And I think that your practice is using that in a super innovative way. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Certainly, yeah. So our practice is, we've got about 30 people, so not quite 26 officers, just slightly more than 26 people, but that seems enough already. We're based in London, and we've been going for like about 6-7 years now. And before that, I was working at a company called Archetype, who are a really fantastic practice. I don't know, in the UK, they're very famous for sustainability and lots of education projects, and they're into kind of passive house. And when me and my business partner met there, we loved everything they did, but we thought that they were thinking about everything building by building, and you can't save the world thinking about each one building at a time. I mean, it's a good start, but like they aren't on every project. So we were like, how can we take that sort of drive and apply it to a city scale or global scale? And so everything that we ever did was to challenge the norms of the industry, and that has along the way caused lots of aborted projects. My least favorite of which was that we actually set up a contracting firm so that we had this idea where we were like, oh, knowledge is too siloed. And so I remember thinking when I was like a part 2 architect or whatever, junior architect, I was like, I don't really even understand how like plasterboard details come together, because why should I? I've never built a plasterboard wall. But the guy that knows about that is such a long way away contractually. When I'm doing the drawings, I'm 6 months before I've even met this guy. So what about if we set up an architecture practice and a development company and a contractor all at the same time, and then we would be able to unsilo the knowledge? That was a research project that I would not be repeating. It's no fun being a contractor, trying to build stuff in the UK with like these horrible old, slightly often drunk people turning up on site and being bossed around by a middle-class architect. It was not an experience that I wish to repeat. But you know, our principles are that we should challenge all of the norms of the industry, and out of that, there's always, you know, inevitably one sticks. And so we are now doing our own development projects, which is quite exciting. So, you know, acquiring sites and achieving planning and delivering them, although I just don't want to build them myself. But the background of our company is that we actually, when we were at Archetype, we were commissioned to do a research project, or my business partner was commissioned to do a research post-occupancy evaluation on one of the projects that we both worked on. And it was a 2-year study, and at the end of it, the results were really good. So it was within the top 5 percentiles of all buildings that had ever been surveyed in terms of user satisfaction. And we were like, well, that's fantastic. And some of the energy results came back were a bit variable, but that's because it was an extension, and you know, there were bits of the M&E that didn't quite talk to each other. But the main thing was that a lot of the users were like, well, we didn't really understand that this is how the building was going to be. Why is the reception here? Everybody comes in this way. The reception's in the wrong place. And so then, you know, there's like, our sort of assumption was like, well, how can we like prototype buildings one-to-one? So anyway, that was part of what we wanted to challenge. And then fast forward a year, and we had this big party because we were celebrating 1 year of not going out of business. You know, in the UK, I think it's 60% of companies go out of business in the first 12 months. And so we were like, we made it. Let's have a party. So we hired this warehouse and we filled it with all this slightly gimmicky stuff because we didn't have any projects to show really that were, you know, anything finished. So we were like, let's get a 3D printer and then we'll print a bit of building, and then we'll get had a CNC machine that was like building a bit of like a component. And then we had this VR headset, and so we went down and this was 5 years ago, we bought like a secondhand Oculus Rift, I think it was, and a desktop computer, and we had a projector, and we had the headset hanging off a wire and an Xbox controller, and like and that was about 150 people at this event. It was a really fun event, but like there was a massive queue to see what was in the VR thing because everyone wanted to walk around the VR thing. And one of the people that was there was the client on the project that we were demoing, and it was a film and photographic studio. And he's queuing up, and we're like, oh God, what's he going to think? And he goes in there and he comes out and he's like, oh my God, that was amazing. Why have you never shown me this before? Like this, I've finally seen, like I've been dreaming about this building for 3 years. You had this 3D model I could walk through with a headset. Why have I not seen this before? We're like, we've only just kind of thought of it, and we sort of rigged it together. And then we were like, but we are kind of onto something, because he came out and he was like, there's quite a few things that now that I've seen it, I want to change. And we were like, well, this is starting to get to the point that we want, which is to how do you prototype building it one-to-one? Well, VR is pretty much the closest you can get. And so that really set us down this path. So, you know, we've invested lots of money and time in improving the way that we do this. And it has this clear financial benefit to us, which is that, particularly with the kind of end user client, with film photographic studios, schools, getting a buy-in early from the key stakeholders avoids redesign later on. And like, you know, I'm talking mainly to architects probably in who's watching this. Everybody knows you never get that money back for the bits of redesign, quite to the extent that you got the initial fee. So because you're like, everybody, you're about to start on site, like, I just want to change this thing, and oh God, okay, fine, whatever, just do it. You never quite get the financial reward. So the VR really helps us get like a real, you know, you get this investment that the client feels like it's theirs, and that they feel like ownership, and there's much more certainty around the delivery, and that avoids redesign. And also it comes back to the sort of sustainable principles that if you build something right the first time, you don't have to rebuild it, then it's more, you know, you've only got the resources once, so you might as well get it right the first time. And so that's, you know, when COVID hit, we'd been talking about doing multi-user VR for a long time. As soon as COVID hit, we were like, oh, actually, we need to work out how to do this, because we need to do remote VR multi-user. So we, within about 2 weeks, worked out how we all had headsets at home, and then we were using a model that was on the cloud, and we were all walking around it, you know, our different architects. And also then we gave headsets to our clients, and we were meeting in the virtual space and walking around the spaces, and we were like, oh, this is amazing. So we were like, we'd invented our own Metaverse, you know, within the first few weeks of code. But that is what the Metaverse is. It's like a 3D visualization. The model was hosted on a cloud server, and there were people accessing it and interacting with each other, and they could mark up and make changes. And in the UK, you actually get you can get R&D tax credits. Same in the EU. I don't know about in the States. So at the end of every year, we get, you know, a tax allowance for all of the research that we do, which is fantastic. And, you know, whenever I sit down with our assessor at the end of the year, he's like, I know that any of the money that you get back from, you know, the tax man, you're going to put all of it back into research, and we are. But, you know, we're not in a position where we can fund, there's not a huge amount of, in the UK, money, you know, accessible for research other than this tax credit. But we do use, you know, a lot of it, and it does go back into trying to do this, you know, use this idea that sustainability is kind of the most sustainable thing you can do is to design things correctly the first time and get as much buy-in as you can. But I think that, you know, the disruptive thing that we've concluded is that in terms of our revenue streams, we had a non-exec who actually was from a tech background, and he was like, just focus on services, because, like, you know, you can try and make apps and try and make money off that, but you're architects, so just try and focus on doing, you know, your services business as efficiently and effectively as you can, and that's probably the way that you can be the most profitable. So that, you know, that's my disruptive idea, is just to focus on one thing rather than lots and lots of different things. And you know, we're not big enough to yet be able to think about too many different things at once. So it's like, you know, trying to use this technology and this research to improve the core service that we offer is our sort of radical idea.
That's
Cool.
That's
fantastic.
amazing.
Just the story. I'm sorry, that's the story of how I ended up here now. There's other bits that I can talk about in terms of the cities of the future and how we hope that this technology progresses. But yeah, like, let's just have a chat. Let's move on to Hamid, and then we can come back and we'll talk about it. Is that, sorry, I don't want to be the chair.
No, I think you did a great job. And before anyone, I think architects had this experience of working in, let's say, Metaverse in our own computers, not as a cloud base. But yeah, architects knew how that world is gonna be like, and as it emerged, we definitely saw the opportunities and jumped into it. Okay, we can now design for Metaverse. We can now create those spaces. All those things that we were creating a 3D model, 3D softwares, we can now monetize them. We can now make use of them. We all have a lot of unused models. We've won maybe competitions or got mentioned in the competitions. Now we can use those models in our metaverses. So it's really a great opportunity when you think about the advantages that it brought to architects. So I'm really thrilled with those advantages.
Mm-hmm. And I think that, like with everything, there is a time to jump on it, and there is this power of early adoption. And I think that right now we're certainly in these times. So, you know, being resistant to that might just mean that you kind of miss out on this opportunity. Like with everything, you know, people that started their Instagrams early, now they have lots of followers, but if you start today, it's not the same. And it's, you know, so there is definitely that whole aspect of it. And I think that it's interesting to look into it from many different perspectives, monetization being one, but also, you know, certainly there is that whole aspect of how you can kind of, what sort of experiences you provide for your clients, and how can you involve them also in that process? Do we now sit over plans and discuss, or are we going to just meet in the metaverse, you know, in one of the rooms that is designed for them, and see how it feels? And that's a whole other level of experience, I think.
Yeah, no, I think the experience within VR, and Ollie, like VR is one part of the work that's really close to my heart. And again, like, you know, a few years back, it was, you know, bringing the first Oculus sets and like exploring with it. And it's really amazing when you start seeing clients' reactions when they put things into perspective and understand more about like how they can walk within the space and all that. Because, you know, again, we are trained architects. We know how to, you know, perhaps visualize plans and elevations and things like that. They don't. And our understanding that, or our assumption that they understand that space similar to us is actually wrong. So I think the VR space allows people who are not trained to read, the architecture drawings to experience that space, understand the scale, how they move through it. And, you get that wow sense. It's like, yeah, I feel like I've lived in my building. And yes, you get buy-in and design ideas much quicker. You get to that certainty. Like I've seen this firsthand. So I completely agree. Like this is a great space to be in. I think in future, like mixed reality is gonna be even more getting more space, specifically as you start seeing like how the digital and the physical interact together. So you're not just being immersed in one virtual space, but you're actually creating all of these digital layers on the spaces that you're in. And I think that is where the real opportunity is right now. But yeah, completely agree with you also on the ideas on the metaverse. I'm really excited to see like how things shape up for architects here.
Sure. Hamid, so since 2016, you have been monetizing on architectural research in quite a lot of unconventional ways. I think that still a lot of them are being discovered by architects. Tell us a little bit about the possibilities and the business side of your platform, Parametric Architecture.
Of course. Let me just correct on that. Since 2016, the platform is started, but it didn't monetize anything regarding the financial monetization until 2020 and the beginning of the pandemic. So for 4 years, I did this for free and just collected audience. And let's say from zero to 500,000, let's say, audience on Instagram. We had LinkedIn, we had Twitter, but we didn't earn anything regarding $0 or as a, and it was always side hustle. And in this 4 years, I became in the realization of there are a lot of information about the new tools emerging in design and architecture, and also new ways of fabrication, new ways of construction and construction industry as well. And I thought maybe somehow I could categorize all these information and try to deliver them to the knowledge enthusiasts. Let's say it could be students, it could be architects working in projects, it could be lead architects, whoever it can be. So we kind of created sort of conference series, education studio workshops, and interview series that we started doing with pioneering architects. It kind of changed everything that the way we were doing it before, like sharing information and knowledge, we did now on a scale. So, and it also from the financial aspect, it brought a lot of great opportunities for us. The company that had $0 in income, which started having 4 or 5 people hiring for joining to the company. So other than the financial aspect, the values that we provided to our audience since the beginning of the pandemic, and also realizing the opportunities offered by going home and doing everything online, I think we did a lot of great knowledge sharing since the beginning of the pandemic. And this uncategorized knowledge that was sharing on YouTube about these tools, we brought them, categorized them in a different courses and a different studio workshops. And none of these are like master classes sold by master class companies or anything online like you can find on Udemy or let's say on YouTube. But we created somehow a business model of bringing, for example, Yehnia or Oli, who are pioneers in their topic, who are really doing great in projects, bringing these folks in here and allowing students, allowing who wants to learn to gain knowledge from these, and also developing a project. So these are the basic ideas that we started, and PA got a huge advantage of having these pioneers involved in these workshops and these conference series, and also sharing these kind of knowledges.
Yeah, and that's fascinating. It's really quite a great progression, I think, from the traditional model of education, and I think it also closes the gap between what happens at university and what we learn there, and then really what we're facing in the practice. Because just like Ollie, you mentioned, you go to practice and you're like, how do you actually build a plaster wall? I had the same thing, but like about everything, how do you actually run a business? Like, how do you actually manage people? How do you actually manage construction? How do you, how do you
Still
actually
trying to work it out now.
Really build foundations, And so out of a sudden it was like, well, maybe it's, working, obviously when you're working on real life projects as a smaller practice, you will design everything, you send it to the engineer, perhaps there will be some changes, you learn in the process. But then a lot of times when you go to your first construction, you're like, oh, this is how it works. And it's like, oh my God, I have never experienced that before. And so at that very early stage, I felt really I needed guidance. And of course, like we kind of fall into that model of like having a mentor architect that we can call and like, hey, what do you do now? But I think that not everyone perhaps has that opportunity, or not everyone feels confident enough to start that, because who do you ask for help? And so a lot of people from the get-go say, oh, it's not for me, because what would I do in this kind of situation? And I think that really there is a need for professional knowledge sharing. There is a lot of things we can learn from one another. And somehow only until now that we have those kind of broadcasts and conferences and ways in which we can come together, it was inaccessible. It wasn't so easy really to tap into.
Exactly, that's the point. For example, if anyone wants to learn from any prominent university professor, they need to go study master's degree or let's say undergrad. But if anyone wants to learn from Yehnia, they need to email Yehnia or meet him in the street or with a friend. But we give this opportunity. Without doing this, we bring these people in the platform, and they can learn and develop a project, get feedback, and also like learn about new tools.
It's actually amazing when you start thinking about how education is changing and like those educational platforms. And I really amazed by your work, Hamid. Again, parametric design, I back for my master's, and I'm thinking, 10, 15 years ago now, after I've done my master's in computational design, I did publish a book around parametric design, and it was like really early phases before even Grasshopper started. And it's interesting because I learned
you look
about
good
this.
for it. You look good for that age. How old are you? Come on. You look like you're in your 20s.
I'm not. I doubled that. So it's interesting when you start thinking about education, because I learned about that very specific topic at university, and without my master's, I wouldn't have. But now I'm seeing so much more opportunities in online, YouTube videos or workshops or conferences. I learned about robotics through workshops. You get into a week and you work with someone who's prominent. We had Oliver Craig, who came from University of Stuttgart in Vancouver for a few days, and we worked together, and I learned about how to manipulate a robot, and that informed our own thinking about how we engage with robotics, and we built our own robot arm. So like you get into these spaces by smaller doses of knowledge that are really concentrated.
Exactly.
And this is amazing. I about 3 or 4 weeks ago, I spent the weekend binge watching an MIT course that was available online for free about blockchain. And you wouldn't have gotten that before, except having, going to MIT and actually being there as a master's student. So it's really interesting how education is now happening, and how the internet in general is just democratizing that access. And I think it's a beautiful thing. So kudos to you. I think you're doing a great thing.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that.
Yeah, it really is revolutionary. But let's maybe talk a little bit about a more traditional way of publishing knowledge. Oscar is not present with us. Unfortunately, he was going to be here, but he published over 300 books. And when I had a conversation with him, about a year ago, I met him, and really he impressed me a lot with the way that he thought about book publishing. And he told me books will never die, no matter how much digitalization comes in play, they will never die. And one of the examples for it, he told me he has, and I think it is something that a lot of architecture firms want to do one day, is kind of print their own monograph of projects, and have that beautiful coffee table, well-wrapped book, with a really nice fancy cover that almost blends into the interior. And that's sort of the stuff that he's doing actually with his publications, specifically only focusing on publications for architecture. But he told me that one of the interesting things from the business perspective was how he saw his clients actually bring those monographs into client meetings and just leave one copy for the client. And it's kind of like an updated version of giving someone a business card. But the thing is that he said that there was actually a spike and a higher percentage of success after that, because not only people had that book just laying there on a coffee table or whatever, they took it home. It almost speaks to you on its own, but also it's just like an expanded version of the experience of your practice and projects. A little bit what Ollie spoke about, putting VR glasses on your potential clients and being like, hey, go into the virtual reality of these projects and see how you feel. Another version of that. But what do you guys think about publishing books in architecture and putting your research on paper in that format?
So we're doing it at the moment. So I was quite excited about meeting whatever his name is.
I can do an introduction.
Oscar, yeah. No, if you could, that'd be great. Because So we on the other topic that we are researching on. So there's two strands. Our top line of our business is that we're building a company to design the cities of the future. And so that sort of has two elements to it that I constantly need to be thinking about. One is like building a company. How do you do that? How do you make sure it's profitable? How do you make sure that it's has staff? All this reasonably mundane stuff. And then what does the cities of the future look like? And so the VR is actually more on the running, the operational thing. It's part of our design process. That's more on like just building a company and making sure the processes work really well. And then it also kind of interacts with how do we design the cities of the future? And that's the bit of research that we're really doing this year, is to put together a manifesto of our thoughts, and not just our thoughts, but we're talking to economists, sustainability specialists. But the flows of money in the UK are just like, if you don't understand that, you don't understand how the world's going to get built. So it's like, and I think people that have done this really well, Richard Rogers, he publishes a book, Cities for a Small Planet. And Richard Rogers is a great architect, but he's an even better marketer. So he went and dropped this book into every politician in the Tony Blair administration, and suddenly, boom, he's the darling of the Blair administration. He gets all these amazing commissions because he told them how the city of London was going to be in the future, and a lot of it came true. And he sort of manifests out himself via this manifesto, which is a book. And so I'm on board with that. I think it's good marketing. And this is the thing, is that like for us now, we've our radical marketing strategy is to not market ourselves to our clients. Because we think that if we can sell ourselves to politicians and to local authorities, then the clients will just have to come on board, right? And this has happened on a couple of projects where the planners, the way the system works in the UK is that the sort of politicians are encouraging of our ideas, and therefore clients will get an idea that we might be the right people to use, and that's fantastic. That shows that our marketing is working, because we're not marketing to clients, we're marketing up the food chain, and that's what a book can do.
Yeah, I think with books, very similar to the Richard Rogers story, you establish yourself as an authority. Like you essentially look at a particular topic and you reflect on it, and you create a manifesto, and from there you document it, and it becomes a solid piece that people can refer to, and then you become an authority in that space. If I can tell a little story about how I got hired in Perkins Will in 2010. In my interview, I had just published the book about parametric design beyond complex geometry, and I was just, in a way, critiquing at that time the use of computation for just pure facade design and articulation without really much substance behind. And I essentially put in that book, and that was my portfolio. Like I had my portfolio as a backup, but nice. I really ended up with the full interview talking about my book, and I I'm pretty sure my MD at that time like didn't really read the book at that time, but she knew that there is something here that is quite new and very similar to how you think about it. This is where the future is, and this is how you've thought about it, and let's try. So I think it's a great way of documenting thoughts. Being a thought leader, taking this chance and understanding about yourself and how you view the world, and then actually writing that, because in the process of writing, you actually clarify even your own thoughts. So I think it's a fascinating way of doing things, and I love reading books. Absolutely. I don't have much experience about monetizing it, because my book, let me tell you, it did not sell well. It was too expensive, and
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's a job, right?
It's out there. Yeah.
Yeah, but I got a job out of it, I guess. But that may be a monetization.
It 100% is. So this guy called Daniel Priestley, he's like this entrepreneur in the UK. Well, he's Australian actually, but he has this course called the KPI, which is Key Person of Influence. It's all about making yourself an authority, and his motto is, the book that will make you the most money is the book that you gave away for free. Right? There's, if you think you're going to make money from the book sale, that's not, you've missed the point, right? You should be giving these books away, selling your ideas for free, and then you get opportunities arise out of it. You thought about it the right way. Make it far too expensive for anybody to afford, but they know that you've written it.
Yeah, it was the publisher who made it expensive, but yeah.
But there's
always the publisher.
Yeah, absolutely. There's some things that you guys are saying that are really getting me going, because I remember at the very beginning of also when I was kind of, studying architecture, I always kind of was intrigued about certain strategies that people took. And, even at the time, about 13 years ago, BIG was becoming a really big name already. He was recognized everywhere, with much less projects than today, and much, smaller presence, but he was really fast emerging. And there's all this kind of talk about, what has he really done? Or he's so big, but why? And da-da-da. And I saw that marketing aspect, and I was like, actually, I think he's selling himself incredibly, and I read about it a little bit. And what he did was created a bunch of visuals and drawings and created a really fully blown portfolio on his website. But also, yes is more. It actually came out really early in his career. And even though there isn't many build projects, it's full of visuals, it's drawings, it's comics, it's so creative. And it speaks to methodology. And so this is something that I think I wanted to kind of link to that whole topic of research and authority, also positioning yourself. Because at the end of the day, we're designers, and our role and what we want to do and what people want us to do also is to deliver those designs. But there's a tremendous amount of research and knowledge that comes into decision making behind those designs. And I think that a lot of times, if we fail to communicate that, we are being seen only as that person that can provide plan sections, elevations, and do the design job. But if you start communicating, the why and the how, and actually lead with that methodology, you out of a sudden you become this person that you're like, oh, actually I really like his ideas. And I think that's kind of a little bit what Big did with that book. So again, to that topic of those tools, I think they're just great for us to position ourselves as an authority. And that really kind of takes us to that topic of value creation for clients and for people that want to potentially work with us, to not see us as a commodity within architecture, but actually to see us as someone who can offer a very unique offering, because it comes from that background of knowledge.
That's absolutely right. Since 2016, we've created this much information and let's say shared this much knowledge. And now I see it's not enough. We need to sort out some kind of book or write about future technologies, past technologies, and also have a glimpse to the future as well. So unless you write a book, it doesn't stay, and it's not stable, and it's not well structured. You can write an article, let's say a science magazine, or you can write for a normal magazine, but it's short. You can't tell everything there. You
You
can't.
got to tell Oscar he should have come on, because he would have got 2 commissions, like just from being on this panel. Me and Hamid are both like just desperate for somebody to publish our book.
Exactly.
I should book you guys in for calls with him.
Yeah, you can take a commission.
Exactly.
Yeah,
We need recommendations from Yehnia.
No,
for
his
the
one's too
public.
expensive.
yeah, that one was too expensive at the end.
Yeah.
But to the story of actually to what you just said, Hamid, you know, I came up with this cool strategy because I also created a lot of content, and I feel that, you know, I will spend so much time on writing articles and sweat it out.
Exactly.
I'm so proud of it. It's like almost like a whole dissertation again, because sometimes the articles are a bit longer. But the thing is that they'll lifespan. Like, you will be able to find it in the future online for sure. But the thing is that, like, you publish on Arc Daily, for example, it goes on the main page, and then, you know,
It's
a day
just 4
later,
hours.
it's like this many articles stuck up on
Yeah.
top. And so, yeah, it just kind of quickly goes. And something that I thought about, and I really love sharing this because I think it's revolutionary for me. It's like, think about, you know, when you create a book, you kind of create like all your chapters there. And then each chapter, like a lot of times people say, like, if you don't know where to start, create a chapter and then create like little bullet points for your paragraphs and then just develop the thought, right? So it's like the sort of concept of how to create content or a book. And I always thought about it as like, how about I structure this prior and then publish those articles, but then those little contents, they actually feed into a book. And so in reality, even though I'm creating those little articles, I am building a bigger book, and it doesn't go to waste. So maybe it's not my publications on Arc Daily that are going to get published in that book, but a little bit more like kind of content that is specific to my expertise and my research. Like, one of the things that I love looking into is kind of like deep dives into architecture practices. I recently wrote a 27-pager on UN Studio, but I spent a really good amount of time both with Ben and with Philip Filippo Lodi, who actually is also part of Disrupt, to find out a little bit more about their strategies and how they approach clients and business and whatnot. And it's a super interesting, I think that sort of content could go into a book. And so looking into how people make decisions around business, you know, and how those little decisions actually benefit them down the road. Because just like Hamid says, when I started with my podcast, for example, I barely had listeners, barely had followers or whatnot, haven't monetized on it for a really long time. But then slowly, the benefits of doing that consistently are coming from other angles and in other ways. And you do actually end up monetizing at the end. So it's like not everything that you do needs to translate into money, but it can quite easily.
Exactly. That's the point. Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, like the monetization, as you say, like maybe sometimes it's not direct, but it adds up to something of greater value, and then you become known for that greater value, and that creates the monetization later on, right? Like sometimes like those connections are not as direct. But yes, absolutely. I think like what you're doing, Sarah, with Disrupt and these conferences, and like there's all very valuable content that you can later on publish. And like if you just have a bigger overview of all of these like specific chapters and what they can talk about. I mean, architecture, research, and business, that could be a really amazing chapter that I would love to read. You know, like these are areas that I think can all add up. And you can invite, you know, authors as well. Like, so like this could be a compilation of articles and, you know, things like that. So
and you're giving me ideas because I actually am extremely passionate about this topic. I'm like obsessed about this book called The Business of Expertise. Not sure if you guys are familiar. It's a small self-published book on Amazon with a red book, but it's extremely valuable and interesting to read. And it really just talks to that topic of like, how much it elevates you as an expert to have research and books and, you know, potentially even be available for consultancy services as an architect. Because if you think about it, being a certain size firm, people might want to come and draw from your expertise into their projects. And so therefore you can open to possibilities to work on a broader range of projects and still be paid, and not necessarily, being a consultant on a project doesn't mean that it is your project, but your name can also be mentioned on those projects. And so it expands your portfolio. And I think it's a tremendous, it's a good way to also expand your sort of, connectivity, community, network, and diversify an income also. So that whole aspect of becoming an expert and an authority in your field, there's a lot of elements to it, but I think one of this certainly is publishing your research, communicating what you're working on within your practice and publishing that.
And it's interesting. I mean, we do discuss this a lot about how do you communicate research, and you can imagine our researchers would have published papers in scientific journals, but we also understand that you want to connect that research to our clients, and our clients are not reading those scientific journals. Yes, they're establishing the researchers and Perkins and Will perhaps as deep expertise and knowledge into certain areas within the academic, environment, but our clients are not reading those. So how do you actually distill research into smaller snippets and interactive ways of showing what you've worked on in a high level, so that you establish yourself as again, the authority in that space, the knowledgeable entity within that space, and you create value for your projects through it, with always an understanding that there is always a link to a published article, or there's always a link to the deeper research. If anyone is really interested and they want to dive deeper, they can go there. But where are your potential audience? Where is your potential audience? Where are your clients? How can you reach them on their platforms in their ways? Because I think that is a different question, because you're not going to rely on everyone reading your book. There has to be a bit of the articles online. There has to be some of the Instagram posts that just have snippets of what we've done. There has to be all sorts of communication methods that allow us to reach the audience where they are. So that's an interesting angle to monetizing and understanding research as well. It's not just about doing the work and establishing the expertise, but it's also how do you
make a
publish
TikTok
that
video out of it?
Yeah,
Exactly.
and how do you? Yeah, exactly. And how do you think about the researchers being able to communicate that research in different formats?
In
Something
20
that
seconds.
is 10 seconds or 20 seconds,
exactly.
and some is
I mean, that's what you have to do, right? Otherwise it's boring. I mean, that's the thing. I've got a short attention span, so for me, research needs to be like, this is why you need it, and I'm like, okay.
Yeah, and if you have the time, dive deeper. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. I don't need it, and I'll be like, okay, cool. That sounds very interesting. I don't need to even read the article. I'm going to get somebody else to read the article to understand the concept, but the idea is communicated very forcibly to me. So I need, and I think that's what you got to do. Otherwise, what is the point of doing the research without? I'm not, TikTok videos are probably slightly reductive, but it needs to be something that's going to get people's attention, which is why Archangel's doing a comic book. It's pretty, it's clever. There's some ideas there. They're communicated in a way that's fun. And again, I haven't even read the comic book, but I just thought that's a cool idea of how research should be communicated.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is a topic that I always discuss with architects, how they should communicate on social media, let's say, at least, not on a particular website. And I always tell them, try to make daily content. If it is a video, if the attention is on TikTok, you need to use TikTok. If the attention is on Instagram, you need to use Instagram. And it's always a hard part for architects, because they do the project, they do the research, but they are not able to somehow popularize it, or let's say to send it out there. Whoever wants to read or whoever wants to find and read about that research, that's some point that architects are not good at. Definitely they need kind of education. They need to kind of a team to have in their, let's say, office, or the communication way itself is a huge topic that needs a lot of attention these days. if you're not communicating modernly, you're out of business.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we did speak about communications actually last week when we had also Amanda Ferber on. She also is an Instagrammer. It's a really interesting conversation. So for anyone listening, it's quite easy to navigate. You can go either to my YouTube, Sara Kolata, or go to Arc Daily's Facebook page and videos section, and you'll see all these previews, roundtables. So on that note, thank you so much, Hamid, Oliver, and Yehnia for this fruitful discussion. Also, I wanted to thank Arc Daily for this tremendous opportunity and support with the symposium. And a big thank you for everyone who joined in. I see that you guys are staying in throughout, so that's amazing. So roundtables like this are held every Thursday at 6 p.m. Central European Time. You can save the day in your calendar and keep your eyes peeled here for or on my social media for further announcements of future projects. And I can tell you that next week we have incredible guests, but in 2 weeks we have Patrick Schumacher in person joining us, together with Krista Kim, who is the first NFT artist that sold an NFT in architecture. And we're going to talk about topics of Metaverse and the future, the digital future, and the possibilities of that for architects. So join us and definitely make sure that you're there. Also, please go to www.disruptsymposium.com to reserve your seat for the big event, which is happening 1st to the 5th of May. All the speakers are going to give a 20-minute presentation followed by a Q&A. That's the format. And we have Schumacher joining us, but also Yehnia, Hamid, and Oscar, who didn't show up today. So Yehnia will speak to us about the money side of research and architecture in his presentation, Design Research Leading the Future of Practice. Hamid will join us to speak about alternative business paths in architecture. And Oscar Ojeda, who that's the name of the publishers if you guys want to check it out, will join us to speak to a topic, Architecture on Paper, over 500 years of criticism, pedagogy, documentation, and branding. So he was...
But if he doesn't show up, I'm going to do it.
Exactly. We'll get you in, Ollie. So don't wait another day. Go to the website and get your ticket. We have only 3 weeks to go until the big event, which is going to be streamed live. So it's exciting. www.disruptsymposium.com. See you all there, and thank you very much. Thanks, guys, also for today.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you so much. Have a nice day.
Bye.
Cheers, guys. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.